You're listening to XFM. I'm Santa and joined by Dave Grohl on the line to talk about the 20th anniversary reissue of In Utero, which is coming out on the 23rd of September in the UK. Dave, it's lovely to chat to you today. How are you?
Thank you very much. It's a little early, I have to say. It's 8:30 in the morning. I was in the studio until 2 a.m., and I just had my first cup of coffee, so let's go.
Okay, first question then. Does it feel like it's been 20 years?
It's funny. I mean, I don't feel like I'm turning 45 next year. You know, I don't feel any different than I did when I was 23 years old or whatever. But 20 years, I mean, a lot's happened in those 20 years. And when I think about In Utero and what the world was like, what my life was like back then, it's just strange, you know. It's kind of a blur, to be honest. I mean, from the time that Nevermind came out in September of 1991 to the time that Nirvana was over was really just a few years, and a lot happened in those few years. So, you know, I look back at this album and looking at the package and seeing all these old pictures and listening to songs that I haven't heard in 20 years and all of these rarities and demos. It's kind of a trip. I mean, I recognize myself back then, and I remember what it was like to be in the band, but it's just hard to believe that much time has gone by. It's crazy.
So how much input did you have personally in putting together this collection? Because it's an astounding amount of photos and music and lyric sheets and things. How much did you really get into that?
Well, I mean, you know, I'm not like knocking on doors and digging through people's safes to find lost tapes, but when it comes to putting everything together, you know, that's when I get most involved, and people start sending me lost tracks for approval, and you know, it's the fun part. Recently, I went up to Seattle actually to play with Paul McCartney. I went up there to play with him at a stadium, one of his stadium gigs. Chris and Pat and I went up to do a song from the Sound City movie with him, and there's a museum there that's owned by Paul Allen, who's a famous computer billionaire. He owns this museum called the Experience Music Project, and there's a Nirvana exhibit in this museum, and I'd never seen it before. So I thought, oh, this will be great. You know, I'll take my kids up there and I'll bring them to this museum where there's a Nirvana exhibit. And they could care less. They didn't really care. They'd rather do, you know, to get candy and run around the park or whatever. But I walked into this exhibit, and there were all of these people that were checking out, like one of my dirty old T-shirts was in a case, you know, and Polaroids and set lists and notes and broken instruments. And I'm looking at all of this stuff thinking, well, that's just our old stuff. Like, who cares about that, you know? It's just old stuff. But I was looking at all of these people walking through the exhibit, like examining and reading every little note about each item, and they were really interested. And so I kind of felt the same way about all of these rarities and lost tracks. When I started getting them sent to me, I'd listen to them and I'd think, well, that's just a freaky little demo that we did in my basement, or that's just a jam we had one day, you know. To me, it's just something we did on the fly in my basement. But to a Nirvana fan, or to anybody that wants a little bit of insight into Nirvana, I suppose it's really interesting. So when I look at the dirty old T-shirt in the case, I'm like, well, that's my old shirt. But to a Nirvana fan, they might look at it and think, wow, they see there's a little more depth to the story now, or there's a little more. And it's interesting. I mean, the story of the band is a pretty incredible story, and I think a lot of it's in the music. So it's a cool reissue.
Is there anything in particular on there which you're particularly excited is out there? I know there's the Forgotten tune, for example. There's the demo of Marigold. Is there anything particularly you're excited that people will get to hear?
Well, you know, the stuff that we recorded in Brazil, in Rio, we spent a few days in a studio there, just kind of jamming and recording the jams. That stuff, it's mostly improvisational, just off the top of your head jamming. I whenever I heard that, or whenever I hear that, it really reminds me of what it was like to be in Nirvana. You know, we spent a lot of time crafting the songs for the album Nevermind, and we worked really hard in this rehearsal space that was a barn to make those songs what they became, you know, and we worked really hard at Nevermind to make that record like a perfect record. But In Utero was different. In Utero was more of a sort of raw, visceral, emotional experience. We weren't trying to craft this perfect record. We were trying to like purge and process everything that had happened to us when Nevermind became popular. So when I listen to those demos, I remember that evening. It just brings everything back, where I was emotionally or what it was like to be in that room, and that's really what it was like to be in Nirvana. And when I listen to that, I think, you know, I'm so glad that we documented that, or that we got that on tape, because capturing those moments, that's what it's all about, you know.
And of course, it being the third and final Nirvana album, how is it now listening to it? Is it quite emotional?
Yeah, I don't like listening to In Utero. It's too real, you know. I mean, we achieved what most musicians try to achieve, in that we hit record and we managed to honestly capture the emotional state of the band, and it was a weird time for us, you know, and it was dark, and it was just kind of a little too real. It's the most honest recording I think I've ever made in my entire life, and I listened to it, and you know, it's heartbreaking that we're not a band anymore. It's heartbreaking that Kurt's not alive anymore, and I listened to it, and it's just so pure and honest and real that it's a little difficult. It's like going back and reading all of your journal entries from a really strange time. It's a beautiful record because it's so real, but for me personally, I don't really like to listen to it too much, because it kind of bums me out.
Before you go, very quickly, Dave, my colleague Dan, who I work with, he heard a rumour that Foos are planning to do some small venues in the UK next year. Is there any truth in that, or is it just gossip?
Well, I'll tell you, we have been in our studio writing, and you know, in the past few weeks, we've written an album, and we're going to make this record in a way that no one's ever done before, and we're pretty excited about it. It's a little ways off, you know. It's not ready to happen right now, but I think next year is going to be a really big year for the Foo Fighters, without question. It's going to be great. I can't wait.
Amazing. Dave Grohl, thank you so much for chatting to me today. Have a good day.
All right. We'll see you around. Bye.